What's up? What's happening? Welcome in. It's the Hoffman Show on a Friday here on the Team 980. We're loaded up. NBA All-Star Weekend is around the corner / starts tonight. Other big basketball night, Unrivaled, the one-on-one tournament. Can Aaliyah Edwards bring it home? That'll be a lot of fun to watch tonight as well. And then, of course, we got some NFL news. We got some local news, if you will, as the mayor all of a sudden just popped out last night and decided she was going to unveil some plans for the RFK site and what she would like it to be. So before we get too deep into that conversation, coming up in about 10 minutes, Eric Flack from WUSA 9, he is, for all intents and purposes, the owner of that story. There's no one who is more on top of all that kind of stuff than Eric. He is going to join us coming up in just a few. But it is a Friday. It is Valentine's Day. Anthony, super producer Anthony Haney, are you feeling love today?
Am I feeling love today?
Yeah, on this Valentine's Day. I feel like it's an important thing.
I mean, Valentine's Day, to me, it's just, I'm not going to say it's just another day, but I feel like if you're, celebrating whoever you're with, you should be doing it every day kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good sentiment, but you always want to make it, I feel like that's a hard balance to get. Take it from an old married man. He's been married for a whopping 2.5 years. But you do want to try to make things extra special. You do want to make sure you make your person feel special every day, but you also want to make some days extra special. The monotony is never even if you're monotonously good to your partner, which is you should be. Monotony ultimately is monotonous. So you gotta find something to do every once in a while.
No, definitely. You should definitely be doing something.
Also, don't always just wait for the holiday. We went on a little dinner date last weekend.
Look, there you go. Check it out.
Restaurant week, and we're like, let's go take advantage.
Should be 365, man.
I'll even shout out where we went. The Duck and the Peach.
Hey,
One
man.
of the best. You've been there?
No.
Oh, it's in southeast. Over in the Union Market, not Union Market, Eastern Market neighborhood.
Oh, that's smooth.
Phenomenal spot. We've been there quite a few times. It's so good. So there you go. Shout out to the Duck and the Peach. If anyone from the Duck and the Peach is listening and they want to sponsor the show or just host me more often, I'm happy to come. See, that's not what is it called? Payola? That's the thing that's illegal. You're not allowed to give free stuff in exchange for stuff. Mm-hmm. But they haven't given me anything. I'm just asking them to. And then they'd actually have to. Anyway, the point is, I'm begging. Anything else you have to say about Valentine's Day, or should we just get to the RFK stuff?
I think the RFK stuff.
Probably. Also, by the way, Anthony, you're still getting love on the internet. We're up to 489,000 views on.
Oh my gosh, we didn't
Taylor
double
Swift.
what we did yesterday, Craig.
Literally almost double. Well, here's the poll question of the day on the Team 980 on the Hoffman Show. Will the TikTok of Anthony Haney guessing Taylor Swift lyric or Jalen Hurts quote get to 500,000 views by the end of the show today?
500. I think so. I would take that bet if I was a betting man.
We are rolling right now. It does not seem to be slowing down. Literally every time I refresh my screen, it's got a couple hundred, if not a couple thousand more views, depending on how long in between screen refreshes,
Yeah.
I am really enjoying the Swifties being like, I got 5 out of 5.
Gotta love it, man.
Yeah.
Gotta love it.
I definitely need to remind me in the commercial break, Anthony, to drop the link to the full video in the comments.
Right.
Need to do that. So some preliminary thoughts on what the mayor announced last night. And I will just be transparent with the audience. I have already taped with Eric. Eric and I taped about an hour or started taping about an hour ago. So you'll hear this me say this again in the interview with Flack. But I click on this new website that they've got for this RFK. It's like rrfk.dc.gov or whatever the website is, and the plans. And the first thing that stands out to me, and is this important in the long term? No. But it does, I think, speak to a larger issue at play here. The first thing I notice, Anthony, is that they have the Washington Spirit logo from 2 years ago that the team no longer uses. And I know that is a very silly thing to be the most important thing to take away. That's clearly not the headline here. It's clearly not the lead. It's clearly not the most important thing. But it does speak to why I think people get really frustrated with stuff of like, hey, if we're going to embark on this multi-billion-dollar project and we're going to have some level of trust in government to get this done, and specifically in DC city government where there's been all kinds of chicanery over the years, then like, can we get the basics right? When you make your big giant graphic with all of the teams in town, can you make sure you get the right logos in? Like, it's that kind of stuff where you're just like, oh my God. And as someone who wants this to happen in DC and like wants the mayor to find the best deal, it just feels like, will you actually put the right people in place to get the details right of making sure, obviously the Commanders will have a huge impact on what they want in the stadium. And I think Josh Harris and his team has already shown, Josh talked about this at the season-ending press conference. He and his team have gone to every single Commanders game, and they don't just go because they want to cheer on the team and be there and be supportive of the players. They're going on stadium tours at, like, especially all of the new places. Like when you go play in Las Vegas or LA or all of these places, Dallas even, that stadium's almost a decade or maybe even over a decade old. It definitely is over a decade old at this point, but it's still like a pretty cutting edge modern stadium. And there's aspects of all of these stadiums that you want to take, or, hey, we were trying to execute this. And Josh can be like, we'll do a better job of that. Or like, oh, did a great job. Let's make sure that we write that down on a notepad. Like the Commanders are going to get the football stadium part right because their ownership group is really smart and they're detailed and whatever. But I think for a lot of other people, like the most important thing is the other stuff. And if we can't trust you to get basic details right on your first impression presentation, then that doesn't speak well to your ability to get the stuff right in the long term. And I think that's just like a generally frustrating thing about government. I am someone, this political take incoming. I'm someone who believes government can do a lot of good. It is an enormous force. It recruits experts. Like, I am someone who believes that government is capable of, and there are plenty of examples of here and around the world, of government helping people doing good. I also am an adult and awake and pay attention and know that sometimes the best argument against government is watching government fall on its face. And that's the same true like in private business. Private businesses fall on their face all the time. Like they're all run publicly or privately by human beings who are fallible and human and make mistakes or whatever. But when you put forth your first impression of, hey, we want to make a presentation that is appealing to folks to try to convince you that we should pay a little bit more money to have a stadium in DC and that we can trust you to build the housing and the restaurants and the green spaces and take this 170 whatever acres that has been sitting vacant forever and do something good with it. And your first impression looks like a high school freshman put together a website. And by the way, one of the logos is 2 years outdated. Like, why would I want to trust you to run $1 billion project? And I think that stuff, like, it's really frustrating. And I think that there needs to be a real, like, better seriousness about this. And I think sometimes Mayor Bowser really gets in her own way in terms of presenting some of these things publicly because she just is not she comes off as such a political actor. She's an incredibly smart woman. I often am very impressed when I hear her in interviews but she is definitely comes off as a politician, which she is, but that she's got her talking points and I wish this was better done, I guess is ultimately like my number one thing when I look at this, like as someone who wants to see this happen and is even willing to like pay a little bit more in whatever tax to see it happen as a district resident. Because I think having the team in the stadium in DC like is good. I would love to conveniently be able to get to RFK in the same way that I can get to Capital One Arena on a metro. I just wish it looked like it wasn't put together by a 10th grader.
So your biggest like problem is more so the layout of the.
There's not enough details yet to get mad about any of the details, right? So like, and we'll get into this with Flack. I'll get into some of the details on the back end of the interview with Flack. But like, for instance, the affordable housing question, it needs to be asked, and the details become really important, and that's where people's eyes glaze over and oh god, sunset provisions
and what's
this
affordable though, like.
And then what's affordable?
Is it equivalent to Navy Yard, because Navy Yard, for me, I'm a DC resident. I wouldn't live here, and I work two, different jobs, and I still would not live down here.
Yeah, you work two jobs. You would save on commuting a bunch of money there's a built-in discount of living in Navy Yard, and you're still like, nah.
Yeah.
But Eric, actually, let's do this. Flack and I get into how some of that stuff works and why you have to pay attention to the details. So I will get more into the smaller picture and some of the details on the back end of this. But I want to let folks hear directly from someone who's been covering this for a long time and who was at this Ward 7 meeting last night. Next, Eric Flack, WUSA 9, about to join us here on the Hoffman Show. The Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app and streaming live on YouTube too at the Team 980, where you see the beautiful face of television's Eric Flack, which must mean there's something going on with the RFK site. Flack, what's up, man?
Hey, what's up? The only person who calls me beautiful is my mom. My girlfriend occasionally after I'm nice to her. But that's
well, what a trio of company I'm now in.
Exactly.
WUSA 9's Eric Flack here. So last night, Mayor Bowser just kind of unannounced rolls out her plans for the RFK site. Like, how did this meeting come together? What was it supposed to be initially? And let's start there. Like, you were at this meeting. Like, what were you expecting, and then what happened?
Well, I was walking into it thinking it was the Ward 7 council member, Wendell Felder, who's newly elected in November. And I thought this was going to be, it was kind of billed as a community meeting, public meeting about the future of the RFK site. But it quickly became clear once I got there that this was a Mayor Bowser production. She was there, Events DC was there, her economic team was there. And while the council member there in Ward 7, this meeting happening at Eastern Senior High School in the shadows of RFK, really just blocks from RFK. Well, he did address the crowd of about 500 community residents who really packed that auditorium. It was really Mayor Bowser who really spoke the most and fielded the most questions. She had a pre-prepared PowerPoint slide deck where she kind of went through her argument of how we got to this point, how RFK, the history of RFK, the history of the site, how it, of course, ended up in bad DC's hands, and the significance of the site and where she sees the value of bringing the Commanders and building a stadium there for the city moving forward. So she kind of, to me, it felt like a soft launch for the series of community meetings she's going to have as she floats an idea. Of course, she has no details as far as the financials, at least publicly, didn't release on, financially what she's thinking, or, when she talks about we can do it all because people have concerns about, having retail, having housing, having green space, preserving, fields for kids. She says we can do it all. She didn't really provide any of those details. It was very much a 10,000 foot kind of like look at her reasoning and rationale for why she's going to pitch this Commander's return to RFK. But this was her first chance to kind of like lay it out there for the public, for reporters like me. And then she spent about an hour taking questions. So I think this was kind of a foreshadowing of a very passionate debate that we're going to have moving forward about not just the RFK site and the potential for a football stadium there, but really how much taxpayer money is going to be used for it and whether or not that's the right thing for DC.
So that was kind of the big breaking news, or the biggest news item, probably biggest headline, maybe is the best way to put that out of this, Eric, is that she, for the first time, was like, yep, there's going to be some taxpayer money involved. What is the range of options there in terms of how much and where that money comes from? In terms of like, is it an extra sales tax? Is it a property thing? Like, there's a million different ways we can be taxed. And boy, do they think of new ones every single day. So like, what kind of range of options are we potentially looking at here, and how is that received in the room?
Hoffman, they're very creative that way with how they tax us. There's going to be a couple of key differentiations. They're going to pay. She's going to certainly said clear cut. A resident said, "Can you commit here and now to not having any sort of a public subsidy, i.e., taxpayer money, for a stadium?" Without hesitation, the mayor said no. She didn't explain herself. She didn't rationalize it. She didn't qualify it. She said no. So for the first time, I think that was the mayor laying down the gauntlet with her voters and saying, I am going to advocate for taxpayer money to go to this stadium. Now, one key distinction, especially in Washington, D.C., is that money going to go to the infrastructure, the things D.C. owns, which is the roads and the the metro, the
stuff
concrete,
around the stadium that makes it worth going to.
Yeah, how you get in and out, the fields, that sort of thing, traffic lights. Is it going to be an investment into that? Or is the investment going to go beyond that? Because the investment into the infrastructure, which would come out of the capital budget, is kind of, a pot of money that's already there. And it can be a very sizable number if she's talking about redoing the infrastructure around 177 acres around the RFK site. If she's going to go, that's an idea that at least has a pretty good chance of getting through DC Council, depending on what the figure is, because it's just a much more palatable way to invest in a stadium, because you're basically improving things. The argument goes that you would already have to improve anyway, which is your roads and sidewalks and so forth. If the investment goes beyond the infrastructure, i.e. money for the building, money for the stadium, that's where things are going to get more tricky. And that's where she's really, really going to face potential pushback from DC Council members. DC Council Chairman Phil Mendelson, who has long advocated against taxpayer money for a football stadium, even though he supported the money, the $500 million plus for Capital One Arena renovations, even mentioned to, when he addressed, and this is hours after the mayor came out with kind of her plan, that to him, investing in the infrastructure is a little bit different than giving the billionaire Josh Harris money for a stadium, money to make his $6 billion investment even more valuable. And we don't really know. The infrastructure piece comes out of the capital budget, the same roads and bridges and stuff that we're doing all around the city. We just take all those like nickels and dimes and push them all in the RFK pile.
Right.
If it's going to be more than that, that's when you're talking about having to either take from the general fund, which there's no money in the general fund because that's like paying cops and teachers and books and stuff like that. Or you're coming up with a new revenue source. And that's when you're talking about either a tax increase, or the idea has been floated, certainly, or theorized among, reporters like me who have been covering this on the beat. The baseball tax, which paid for Nats Park, is set to sunset. It's set to end. It's a tax on businesses. You could conceivably extend that tax on businesses, and all of a sudden you have a new pot of money to just shift over to RFK or whatever replaces RFK.
Right. And or a football tax for any new businesses that open in that area, et cetera. But then that's then you have to take out, I'm sure, a loan, which I'm sure they're going to do anyway. But then it gets into like really nitty gritty details of financing things. But you ultimately take out a loan, repay it with the tax, et cetera. Speaking of the baseball tax and Navy Yard, is Eric Flack, WUSA 9, with us here on the Hoffman Show. Mayor Bowser in the presentation, and then ultimately what they put up on the website. First of all, may I be petty for a moment?
Sure.
Can I just point out something that I might be the only person that noticed this, but if we're going to trust you to do a multi-billion-dollar project, and we're gonna be detail oriented, and we're gonna consult experts, and we're gonna do, can you use the Washington Spirit logo that hasn't been retired for 2 years? The current Washington Spirit logo is black and white. It has been that way for 2 years. The red, white, and blue logo has not been in use for a long time. And that's the one that the mayor's office put on the map. So to whoever did that, I hope you're watching, and I hope you change that on the website immediately.
I think that's probably Events DC. I mean, I would have to guess. I mean, those types of things, I'm almost sure it's Events DC. And those
Events
are the
DC.
little things.
Come on.
Yeah. I mean, those are the little things that matter, that are big things. But
if you just just to build trust and be like, hey, we can trust you with being responsible. Like you don't overlook things like using a logo. I mean, there's, I think, more controversial logos that they could have used, but I don't want to open that can of worms in this conversation. The point is, Eric,
it's a different podcast.
Yes, indeed. Different podcast, different radio show, different everything. They talk about Navy Yard in this, and I think one of the big questions around this RFK site is, can they, in this multi-use system that they want to deploy, is there going to be affordable housing? And if Navy Yard is the blueprint, the answer is no. Because if you've been apartment shopping in Navy Yard, you know the word affordable isn't really in there unless you have a very, very large income. So how are they planning on selling this? And was this just something that, in terms of the housing side of this and trying to be there for the community and the city that needs that desperately, and how was that addressed in the room last night?
So she was asked about affordable housing. This plan that she rolled out did not have details. It was long on concepts and high ideals and short on details and nitty gritty. The way affordable housing works typically in DC is that developers get a tax break to build housing in these areas, and they are required to reserve X amount of units to be affordable, truly affordable.
So in other words, there are units in the same building that are the full price, if you will. And then there are some that if you presumably meet, and I actually, we were joking before we got on here about radio money. Buddy, when I was working in Dallas, I was well below the affordable housing line. My first job down there in Dallas, and I actually had a subsidized apartment in a building like that. So I presume that there's then a number in terms of either individual or household income where you receive a lower price on that same unit.
That's right. But here's the catch, and here's what we're seeing in Navy Yard now, is that the developer is only required to keep those affordable units for X amount of time. And that eventually you can sunset out of that to where all the units eventually are able to be priced at market rate. And that is, so they will be affordable for a while. But if you look at, what's happening in Navy Yard now, Nats Park is 15, 16 years old, something like that. I think it's old, check me on that. And that's about the age at which, some of these units kind of come off and that affordable housing kind of goes away. And so, yeah, there's going to be affordable housing. There really will be. I guarantee you. Long term, though, the economic development, as we've seen in Navy Yard, ultimately wins out. And the long term, over the time space continuum, you end up in that gentrification space where ultimately it's all high priced housing, all very expensive units, and that's what we're seeing in Navy Yard. And some would argue that's eventually what we're going to see in the RFK site if in fact this development takes place. And keep in mind, it's just going to be, there's not that much room. I mean, regardless of how much housing they build, there's not that much room. I mean, there is going to be a stadium there. I think she said the stadium, first time I've heard this, is like 23, 25 acres. It's 177 acres. So there's land to do other stuff. But we're still, still yet to be seen on what the breakdown is going to be and how that promise is going to be fulfilled.
Yeah, Eric Flack, WSA 9 with us. And I did double check since you asked. Nats opened Nats Park in 2008, so we're talking about 17 years ago at this point. We're actually almost right to that date. It was March 22nd of 2008 that the GW baseball team actually played the first game at Nats Park before the Nationals ultimately opened later that month with an exhibition against the Orioles. So as we were talking to Eric about this RFK site and the latest, was there anybody from the Commanders there, or are they going to try to hang out in the background as long as possible and keep their hands clean, at least publicly? That way, if something does blow up and they wind up in Maryland or whatever, they just don't want to have to deal with it until it's done.
Great question. There was nobody from the Commanders there. It felt a little bit early because there's no deal in place. My understanding is that it's likely the Commanders will also be holding meetings eventually when they're ready. The mayor indicated that this was the first of a number of public meetings she was going to have on the issue. And you expect that even though it was a packed room last night, these meetings will become more passionate, even more crowded. And as people mobilize And again, I felt like yesterday was kind of a soft kind of opening when when we're publicizing these meetings more. Hey, the mayor's going to have this meeting. People are really going to kind of like come with their arguments and blazing and ready to go. And they did some to a certain extent last night. But the commanders certainly, I think, are prepared to answer these questions. I think the commanders are going to have their own presentation. I think that they would have probably hit the details of more than a stadium, more than the mayor did. I think the mayor referenced that, but was very short on, specifics. I think the commanders probably, when you see them go public, will be very intentional about what they have to say about a stadium plus, and they're going to hit the plus really, really hard because they know what the arguments against are, and they know that the best way to counteract that is to give people the answer before they ask the question. And so I think the commanders were well aware this meeting was going to happen, and I think they were monitoring it very closely to see what the temperature in the room was among those 500 people. And I think, probably pleasantly surprised that it wasn't a wild, pushback. I think it was more, if I had to, speak in broad brushes, I think the crowd very much was like, we have questions, we have concerns, but we're open to the idea. If you can assure us, how are you going to make sure our worst fears aren't realized when it comes to parking, environmental impacts, congestion?
Glad you mentioned. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the environmental things. I want to ask you this real quick before we let you go. There was a report or some reporting earlier in the week, or maybe it was late last week, that apparently some of the green initiatives or some of the climate-based laws were waived. Provisions, I don't know what the right word is, were waived for the Capital One Arena construction project, which I'm sure heightens the stakes for this one. What do you know about what Ted Leonsis doesn't have to do to follow the rules that everyone else does on this and Capital One? And then how do you think that ultimately impacts how the RFK negotiations go down?
I think, I'm not an environmentalist. So I would say that, from my knowledge, waiving environmental regulations happens more probably than we'd like to know in major developments, projects like this. Older buildings often have, issues with them, especially when you're tearing down walls. Things that we have to deal with that aren't necessarily deemed, that aren't used today. And so often to mitigate price and to make things realistic moving forward, you have to, that's why waivers exist, to say, hey, we don't have bad intentions here, but there are some regulations we're not going to meet. And I think, for RFK, and I've done some reporting on it as well, that building is absolutely filled with asbestos. And they have had, that's why it took so much longer than we ever really anticipated, because they have paused the work there at RFK a number of different times.
I think I saw the demolition is going to take like 22 months.
Yeah,
we don't get a fun stadium implosion deal. They're going to take it apart piece by piece.
They have already started. I've been told that the interior is gone. It's really just a shell right now, and it's too congested. One of the challenges of building a new stadium there's residential like right there. There's a river on the other side. Like, we can't have one of those fun implosions.
Yeah.
But I think that the environmental issues there have been mitigated. What they will not have to deal with, and why they won't have to get exemptions, and they are very aware, I think the commanders are, at least, of those environmental concerns, is that you're building a new building and there's no reason to waive environmental regulations with a new building. I think what we're dealing with at Capital One is you're dealing with an older building, and therefore you're kind of dealing with, having to tear out walls and deconstruct things that were built at a time long before our current environmental regulations kind of came into place.
Got it. So in some ways, it's the ability to keep some things in place that wouldn't pass code if they were new.
Yeah, I think
updating what you can.
For lack of a better term, I think Capital One likely got grandfathered in.
Gotcha.
Because of the age of the building.
Gotcha.
To get around some of those environmental regulations, but that wouldn't be an issue for a brand new structure like a football stadium.
Got it. All right, Eric Flack's got more on this. WUSA 9. You can check out their website. Obviously, you can watch him on television as well as there'll be many more of meetings like this. I'm excited to see how these go, and we're finally getting there. You've been covering this longer than I have, but we're getting closer. There's going to be a decision. I mean, do we think there's going to be a decision on the site in this calendar year? Like by the time?
Oh yeah, the mayor's budget is due first couple days of April. So I mean, money for the stadium is going to have to be included in the budget. So really,
so we're going to know DC or Maryland by the end of the next. Oh my God, it's almost March already.
Yeah, 6 weeks. I think we got about 6 weeks from now.
Wow.
I mean, the budget will bleed out to council members, before then, and you would presume that the Commanders and Bowser would have a joint press conference to announce any deal. So. I think we're looking at mid to late March, where if it's going to happen in DC, the first announcement of an official agreement, takes place.
Do you imagine like a Myles Garrett trade one day, and then you got
the Commanders will know better. They'll space out those news releases.
I don't know if Adam Peters is consulting the business side if he's trying to get Myles Garrett.
I guarantee you he's built. Yes, no, of course they are. This is not the old.
The Browns are not going to cooperate with that. The Browns can't cooperate with themselves.
Right. But then they're going to put off the stadium announcement.
Fair enough. That's possible.
There's no way the Commanders drop a stadium and Myles Garrett in the same news cycle. There's 0.0 chance. I owe you steak dinner if they do. Right here, right now on your show.
I either get multiple news cycles in a time of the year when I appreciate a good news cycle because there's not as much things naturally going on, or a steak dinner. I just won this interview. Eric Flack, everybody, with us here on the Hoffman Show. All right, that's Eric with us. Again, we'll react to what he had to say about the RFK site and why the devil is in the details for all of this next on the Team 980. The Hoffman Show, we're brought to you by the Maryland Vehicle Theft Prevention Council. Maryland drivers, did you know a vehicle is stolen every 16 minutes in the state of Maryland? The key to preventing theft is in your hands. Lock your car, take your key, use an anti-theft device, and learn more about vehicle theft prevention at mdauthotheft.org. Varun Shankar of the Washington Post is going to join us coming up at 5 o'clock for Not My Beat today. He wrote a big feature on Alex Sarr in the Post that's excellent. Sarr and Bob Carrington and Bilal Koulibaly will be competing in the NBA's Rising Stars Challenge tonight, so it'll be fun to talk to Varun about this piece that he wrote on Alex, which is just tremendous in the Post. But Anthony, to wrap up the hour here, I want to dive back into the RFK stuff, or continue diving into the RFK stuff now that folks have heard the conversation with Flack, because I think, like, it's really easy if people don't pay attention, right? And this is sometimes, if we're just being blunt, what politicians rely on is people not paying attention to the details. It is why some of the early Greek philosophers who were, obviously democracy was invented back in ancient Greece, and they were like, this is a terrible idea because folks are not going to be informed enough to make good decisions on their own behalf. But I think, when people talk about the affordable housing crisis in D.C. and then they don't bother to look at the details, then it's very easy to see how stuff like that slips through the cracks. And I think Eric did a really good job of explaining that in that interview, where there is 100% chance that if this all passes, there will be affordable housing to start around the RFK site, which is great. Like, we need it. There's not going to be room for too much stuff, but there will be room for some, and some is better than nothing. Great. Fantastic. But then what? Because these buildings are going to be probably more luxury buildings, and there will be, hey, if your either household income or individual salary is under X amount, then you can get a subsidized rate. So that luxury apartment becomes affordable for you, but maybe only for a certain amount of time. And those details really matter, because considering where we are as a country with our housing crisis situation and like our generation specifically, and like I'm frankly not interested in buying a house because the market is so bad right now. They're so expensive. The mortgage rates are outrageous that I think paying less money in rent to just have the roof over my head, even though I'm not building equity, is worth it for me right now and for where I'm at in my life and my family's at in our lives. And I would love for that to change. I would love for that to get to a point, although it's nice to just be able to call someone and be like, hey, this is broken. Call your landlord, call your apartment building, whatever. And when you're a homeowner, you got to deal with that stuff. But it's worth it if you can build equity over time. And like, we are the first generation to have less money than our parents and have fewer opportunities than our parents because of the way the economics of our country have changed. And so if they're going to build these affordable housing and sell the headline, sell up here, hey, affordable housing gets built as part of the RFK site, but it's not something that anybody that is looking to make their status in life better can buy. Sure, you can live in a really nice apartment subsidized by the government, by the city, by whatever other, by the company, however those details work. You can live there, even if you can live there for 15 years. And then those disappear. That's not actually changing the economic picture that we're currently dealing with. And I know that's really not that exciting, and certainly not if you're tuning in to hear about the top 100 free agents on the, and who the Commanders are interested in, what you thought you'd be hearing today. But like, this is going to be a discussion that is happening, and it's going to happen rapidly. Like I did not realize that we are like 6 weeks away potentially from knowing the answer of would the Commanders return to RFK. And that's basically what Flack said at the end, because the budget is due. And unless this is going to get pushed off one more year, because the budget is due early enough in 2026 that the Commanders and the city push it off in one more year, we're going to know soon. So I think it's important that, especially for sports fans who are going to be more swayed by the idea of having the Commanders at RFK, but are also trying to make sense of, hey, what do I actually want as a citizen of the district? If you're a DC resident, or frankly, like if you're someone who's in Maryland and wrestling with some of the same issues, like I think we owe it to the audience to be honest and to get into some of this in a little bit more detail. And I think that kind of detail in terms of not just what's available in the short term, but like this is a long-term project. What are the long-term implications are absolutely something that belong on our show.
Yeah, I like your perspective on, the whole housing thing. And just being a resident of the district, like we've seen, especially on the south side, like where RFK is, like, again, I live across the bridge from it. So I know what it used to look like and how it looks like now, the differences from, when I was growing up to like what it is now. And I'm not going to say like they're slowly but surely, like, moving, I guess, African Americans out, but that's sort of kind of like what it's given. And I feel
it's exactly what's happening. There's been a gentrification of this city over the course of time, based off of rent prices and amongst other things that have just moved folks out. And whether it is intentionally, I'm going to use the word, ooh, everybody ready, put your big boy pants on and big girl pants on, whether it's intentionally racist or the way the demographics work in terms of income inequality along racial lines, it is something that is happening by happenstance. Yeah. I'm not going to get into that because it's probably a mix of both, and I'm not trying to ascribe any motive to any singular person. And again, that is probably a different show. Yeah. But the gentrification of DC is absolutely real. And, yes, will people buy those luxury apartments if they make them luxury apartments? Yes.
Hell yeah.
But who is buying them, and then who is displaced by that matters. And like, people don't like, on a functional baseline basis, people do not want to be moved from their homes. Like, especially if your family has lived there for a long time. And so, well, you can be like, oh, well, that's business. It's like, no, these are people's homes. And we should have the humanity to take that into consideration as we consider this whole situation. And I certainly hope that the people that have lived there for generations and would like to continue living there get that kind of say and have the opportunity to do so, whether it's in their current homes or moving across the street into something that's different. But like, it's still something they can afford to not just live in temporarily and then eventually get priced out of, but like own and have the next multiple generations of their family live there.
Yeah, and the houses over there are actually like houses. So a lot of those houses probably been passed down, or, you know, it's probably a family house. And a lot of people have those houses. So it would be, you know, sad to see those people displaced just because of what the area is meant to them. Like, you got Rosedale, you got 17th Street, you got Benning Road, like right up the block as well. So even when they got the Audi practice field over there, some people got, you know, displaced and stuff. So it's just, I don't know, man. It's tough. It is tough.
It's tough. You want to make sure the cities continue to move forward. You want things to get modernized. You don't want people to get left behind, and you don't want to just leave stuff in place that leaves people behind. To be like, oh, well, we didn't gentrify it. And it's like, oh, so you just left people behind? And that's a hard thing to do. I'm not saying that any of this is easy. What I am saying is that there should be great care taken and that we should demand that of our leaders as we make a decision about a football team and where they're going to play 10 times, hopefully closer to 12 times per year, some home playoff games. Let's go, Jaden. But that's 12 days. Add in 3 Beyonce concerts. Add in 4 Taylor Swift concerts, add in, you know, whatever else. We already missed out on the World Cup. Who knows when that'll be back? Thanks, Dan. But it's a complicated, like, on a baseline level, do I want to see the Commanders return to RFK? Absolutely. Do I acknowledge that the path to get there is filled with a million details that are tricky and some of which might cause me to eventually go, that didn't get solved in the way I think it should, and back off that stance? Yeah, I reserve the right to change my mind, and that's up to Mayor Bowser and the team and anybody else who's putting forth this project to convince us all over the next couple of weeks here as they make this decision, and then ultimately whether there's a vote on it or however that's going to go down, specifically within Ward 7 over there in the actual neighborhood. All right, when we get back here on the Hoffman Show, let's talk some hoops with Varun Shankar of the Washington Post. The Wizards beat reporter for the Post had a tremendous profile on Alex Sarr. Remember that 0 for 15 game he had this summer, Anthony?
Yep.
Turns out that was a really big turning point for him in a really tremendous way, and Varun wrote about it. You'll hear us talk about that because I'm going to ask about it next on the Team 980. the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app, streaming live on YouTube too at the Team 980. Remember, if you listen for an hour a day, you can be entered to win on the Odyssey app. That is, you have to listen there to our Slam Dunk in Vegas contest. Just make sure you're signed in as you listen. You listen for an hour, free entry. It is a national contest, so you are amongst stiff competition for the most dedicated and loyal listeners around the country. You win. You get a trip to Vegas paid for you and 3 friends, plus $20K in spending money. That's pretty good. More details available are on our website. All right. Speaking of traveling for basketball, the Wizards have 3 players that are playing in the Rising Stars weekend or game tonight. If their team wins, they'll be playing this weekend in the new All-Star format. Alex Sarr amongst them. And Varun Shankar of the Washington Post wrote a fantastic article on Alex today, a feature story, and we want to talk to him about it. And luckily, Varun is standing by, so let's get to it. Today's edition of Not My Beat.
Today's top story from the perspective of someone who's there.
You are looking live.
This just in.
Not My Beat.
Fancy introduction. All right, here we go. In 3, 2, and 1. Oh, sorry, one more thing. Can you say your name for me so I make sure that I'm not bastardizing it?
Sure, yeah. There's 2 different ways.
Today's top story from the perspective of someone who's there.
You are looking live.
This just in.
Not my beat.
Fancy introduction. All right, here we go. In 3, 2, and 1. Oh.
Today's top story from the perspective of someone who's there.
You are looking live.
This just in.
Not my beat.
Fancy introduction. All right, here we go. In 3, 2, and 1. Oh, sorry. One more thing. Can you say your name for me so I make sure that I'm not bastardizing it?
Sure, yeah. There's 2 different ways you could say it. Either is totally fine. The ideal one is Varun Shankar.
Okay.
And if
Varun
that's
Shankar?
like,
as long as I don't
Varun
sound like I'm. And say like, oh, hey, don't worry about that. We're not good enough for that right now.
I don't think it's necessarily that they're saying like we're not good enough right now. It's more just letting the young guys know that growing pains are part of growth, essentially. And they really do try to prepare them for it. It is not going to be easy, and you may not see the results immediately that you need. And there's a mental toughness that they're trying to bring in players with that mental toughness, but also remind them, instill it, encourage it. They talk about winning and losing a lot. Like the veterans, especially the coaching staff, especially like you can like look at Brian Keefe on the sideline during a Wizards game if you get the chance. Like he is living and dying with every basket, and
it's a lot of dying this year. Poor Brian.
He like these are competitive people at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Like, no one is coming into the locker room afterward happy about the loss, but they also do understand where the team is in the trajectory and what they're trying to achieve.
Varun Shankar from the Washington Post with us here on the Hoffman Show for Not My Beat today. So getting back more specifically to Sarr for a second, and then I just kind of want to do a halfway point check-in to round out our visit here. But when you talk about Sarr specifically, you have some numbers in the piece of some areas of improvement, but you watch him every single night. You watched every single minute of the season. Like, where is he compared to maybe where you thought he would be when you kind of saw him for the first time, whether it was that summer league game or the beginning of the regular season? And like, has how he's played this year and how the development has gone changed what you think he can be as a player?
I was watching that summer league game back for the story and watching his shot attempts in particular. And the biggest thing that stood out to me is obviously, like, they tell me we're working on the base. When I talk to the trainer, you could see the change in it when Sarr like lines up for shot now. Like in summer league, his feet were kind of all over the place. He didn't look sturdy, and now every time it looks more repeatable. It looks a lot smoother. So you are seeing some level of improvement. I think he is. I don't like the shooting is going to be something that needs to come around, and I do think they expect it to come around sooner rather than later. I don't sense a lot of concern from the Wizards about that. For him, it's about continuing his defensive engagement and activity. He's been good there. I think he can probably be a little bit better than he even has so far. He's incredibly versatile on that side of things, which really helps. He needs to improve as a rebounder. He needs to improve his hands down low. There's a lot of times you'll see passes bounce off his hands or rebounds bounce off his hands, and that's just something that he needs to clean up. But you can't like when he gets in the open court and he grabs a rebound and goes, like, it is a sight to see, because that is a fluid athlete who's able to read the court really well, and his playmaking has been maybe one of the biggest unexpected surprises about his game, because you put him in the short roll, he's finding open passers, he's making advanced reads. You put him in the fast break situation, he's hitting cutters, he's operating from the high post. He's doing a lot of pretty advanced stuff for a guy his age.
So what I'm hearing is let's get him in the summer out. Part of his jump season this year, we're going to get him to Commander's training camp. We're going to get him on the jugs machine.
I said it. Yep,
yeah,
100%.
Let's just go. I don't know if they make a jugs machine for basketballs, but I think the footballs will help his hand-eye coordination. They had a nice stuff. Get him out there with Scary Terry. Terry can help anyone. That's my thought.
You know how with like RG3 and Jaden Daniels, they kept telling him to go to
the Nationals
Park
to
slide. Same thing here.
Yeah, exactly. A little cross sport training. Never hurt anybody. Actually, it might have, but we don't need to talk about that. So when you look at, like, I guess the last thing I'll ask you about Sarr specifically is in terms of the ceiling, right? Every draft class, I think in NBA history, if I have this stat right, but if not, it's like the last 25 years or whatever, modern, whatever you want to call it, has had an all-star. That no matter how good or bad the draft class is, there's always at least one every single year that turns into like a multi-time all-star. Do we think that Alex Sarr can get there? Because there's this thought that like maybe this is the class that doesn't, and like Sarr might turn into a really good defensive player, but he's never going to score enough to get to be an all-star. Is he a guy that you think can make in his career? Like when you look at the trajectory, you look at what he's doing now, you get to know the person behind him a little bit in the course of this piece. Like, is that on the table for him, do you think?
I don't think he's shown me anything yet that makes me say definitively yes, he will be an all-star, or even likely yes, he will be an all-star. But nothing that I've learned about him so far makes me rule it out for the future, because he has improved so much over the short span of time. He's going to continue improving it, and at the bare minimum, he has the athletic baseline to make that a potential outcome for him.
All right. As for the other guys in this draft class for the Wizards, Bub Carrington, we'll start with him, and then we'll wrap with Keyshawn George as we kind of halfway check in on the Wiz here at the All-Star break. Of course, Sarr and Carrington and Bilal all competing in the Rising Stars Challenge tonight. If their teams win, they'll be a part of the new All-Star format on Sunday. For Bub, though, the second of the 3 first-rounders this year, is that a really interesting year, I think, because you see some flashes, but you also, I think, just the youth of Bub Carrington tends to jump out a lot. What have you seen from him in terms of, again, where he started beginning of the season and where he is now in terms of the growth? He's also had a very in flux role around with the other injuries at that guard spot this year. Yeah,
Bub has been pretty impressive, all things considered, based on the tough situation he's been put in. I think he started the season at just 18 years old. He turned 19 during the season, and he's set to play point guard a lot of the time. He's organizing the offense for the Wizards, and it's something where I think he stood out in that way. This is someone who was a son of a coach, great basketball mind, I think, and I think that's already starting to show up. He has been a very impressive movement shooter. You see him doing a lot of stuff off the dribble, coming around screens, relocating, and he's started to be pretty good from 3, I'm pretty sure, if you look at the pull-up numbers. Biggest question for him is how good of a defender can he turn into? I think he has the tools and he has the makeup to do so, but it's a question of actually like bringing those two things together and becoming actually good at it. And then the second part of it is, does he ever become good enough at getting to the rim to up that upside a little bit more? Because right now he is a pretty perimeter-oriented player. He didn't get to the rim a lot in college. Some of that, he and his family talk about that being a byproduct of him having a late growth spurt, so he just hasn't had to do it yet much. But we'll see. I mean, that's one of the biggest questions. Can he get to the rim on a consistent basis?
Yeah, and you have to wonder how much that changes over the next couple of years as he gets his grown man body, because he's still basically a child. I don't say that pejoratively. I say that like he just turned 19 years old. He very much will be adding weight naturally. Nevertheless, the work that he does in an NBA weight room, specifically that NBA weight room, we saw how Bilal is added some bulk over his year and a half now with the Wizards. Varun Shankar with us from the Washington Post. Of course, they're Wizards beat reporter. The new feature on Alex Sarr is available now at WashingtonPost.com/sports. And then last rookie that we should talk about here, Keyshawn George, I think has been just an absolute revelation. Guys taken in the 20s are not, they're typically not good, period. Nevertheless, good immediately. So what have you seen? Like, and I'm going to ask this question this way because, like, oh my God, he's contributing. We're happy, but like, okay, he's still a rookie. He can still grow. He's still really young. So the same exact question, if we take away his draft status, from what we saw at the beginning of the year from Keyshawn George to what we see now and what we think he can grow into, like, how much has that changed for you and what you see from him?
He came into the league, I feel like his reputation was this is a shooter, right? He shot 40% on threes at Miami, and that seemed like his role. He was big, 3-and-D, prototypical. I've been really surprised at how good of a connector and facilitator he is. He's a very good passer, very smart passer. They've been putting him more on-ball situations as the years gone on. I think that's something where they're trying to expand his role and see what he's doing. I mean, listen, the Wizards are still trying to learn about their young players at this point. We've only got, 50-something games of data, and they haven't played, obviously, every single one. Maybe Bub has, actually. But generally speaking, like, you've got a limited sample size to work off of. They're still trying to learn what's the deal with these players. So the on-ball stuff has been a little bit more impressive as you've gone along, and the shooting is starting to come around. He started the season really badly, which was a little bit unexpected because of what he came into the league as, but it started to come around. You're starting to see the rest of the pieces come together. The biggest question for me with Keyshawn is he does a lot well right now. He is a pretty good passer. He's a pretty good, shooter. He can get to the rim a little bit. He can finish okay around there. He is a multi-positional defender. Does any of those things go from acceptable, slightly above average to good, great, premier? Like, that's really where he's a jack of all trades. Does he start boosting what those trades are a little bit more?
That's a great call. And I think the other thing that's worth pointing out with Keyshawn is to go full circle here back to the story that the anecdote, I should say, that you have about Sarr in the Summer League game. Keyshawn's got some of that too, because he's had some nasty shooting stretches this year. And like, it takes real gumption to go like 0 of 11 or 2 of 12 from 3 a game to just keep shooting. And he's got a couple of those. And in the short term, like, obviously that's less than ideal. You want those shots to go in. But in the long term, the fact that he just keeps shooting, and he and Sarr and Bub are all kind of really taking to this just keep shooting, just keep playing, keep it moving forward mentality, I think is a really exciting thing for the Wizards. Of course, they need an influx of talent. That'll come hopefully in this draft lottery. But that's something we'll worry about in May. For right now, we'll enjoy them in the All-Star festivities this weekend. Varun Shankar, the piece is available now, WashingtonPost.com/sports. Really great read on Alex Sarr. Hey, man, enjoy your All-Star break. I don't know if you get a break, but enjoy the break if you do. Excellent.
I'm very excited about it.
I bet. Your first season on the beat. Those NBA beat jobs, man, as a guy who used to be on the NFL beat, I was like, this is hard. I can't imagine an NBA beat. 82 of these things? Man, that was 16 back then. I didn't have to worry about a 17-game schedule. I was soft. That's why I sit in a chair and give opinions now.
I'm enjoying my rent now. That's why I say I get to stay home for like 2 or so weeks. It's been a brutal road schedule, so I get to enjoy my rent. Oh my God, my apartment does look like this. Wow.
Yeah. You enjoy the inside. It's going to be cold. There's no reason to go outside. Varun Shankar, everybody. Back with more Hoffman Show next.
This is the
We're streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980, and coming up at 6 o'clock, what does the offensive and defensive line classes look like in this upcoming NFL draft? Logan Paulson has started his draft prep. You know that he is all over everything when it comes to the lines, offensive, defensive. That is obviously also a huge position of interest for the Commanders. So you'll hear Logan's take on this draft class coming up at 6 p.m. We also have our weekend preview still to come, which, Anthony, who's that brought to you by?
Nobody, Craig.
Yeah, it's still is brought to you by nobody. We're going to take a look at some of the latest mock drafts that are out there and what they've got the Commanders doing in a second. But we have officially, Anthony, reached the halfway point of the show, which means before we do an NFL mock draft update, we have to do a TikTok Taylor Swift Anthony going viral update. And currently,
where we at?
You have to guess.
We were at 47 to start the show, right?
We were at 489 to start the show.
489 to start the show. Okay.
Yeah, and the question is, would we get over 500K?
We are at 494.
No, 504,000 already. We've already crossed 500K. Bro, there is a chance.
Hey, that is insane.
That this is my/our first million hit TikTok.
It's going. It's going to keep going, man. It's going to keep going.
Rachel had another idea the other I know. Rachel had an idea. Might have become the most dangerous phrase for Anthony Haney on this radio program.
It's always good, though. But, you know.
Sometimes you're on the wrong. I have been warned, though. There's going to be a day where she messages you, and I'm going to get surprised. So I know that's coming too. So,
hey, look, I'm looking forward to it.
But she did say, what if we basically combined the last two amazing ideas she's had that have resulted in these kinds of things happening, where last time it was real tweets versus fake Travis Kelce tweets when all of his tweets were going viral.
Yeah.
And this one was Taylor Swift or Jalen Hurts. What if she wrote fake Taylor Swift lyrics, and then you had to test which ones are real or fake?
I mean, I would probably still do as good as I did last time, because I don't know too many Taylor Swift lyrics.
I don't either.
And
it also does lose our sports tie. So we should try to think of another athlete.
Yeah.
Or just find, I don't know. This is apparently a whole genre, so we might be able to tap into some ones that some folks have already done.
That is
save
so
ourselves,
crazy, man.
Save ourselves some work.
500K.
500K.
Wow.
You know what it if it crosses, let me see what the other one is. If it crosses 552K.
Oh, that's coming for that number one spot, Craig.
That's my most watched. And Anthony, do you know what my most watched ever TikTok is?
Gotta be Shane.
It's Shane from Oxon Hill.
Gotta be Shane from Oxon Hill.
You're absolutely right. It's Shane from Oxon Hill. Honestly, Anthony, I kind of want to push back our mock draft talk, and I want to just play Shane from Oxon Hill's call now.
Oh, my gosh.
Because this might be his last hurrah, Anthony. The rate we're going, he might be dead by the end of the show.
Yeah, because we're moving on.
Certainly by the end of the weekend. By the end of the weekend, Shane is not going to be sitting on the TikTok throne. He had a tremendous run. And honestly, there would be some like arc of, I don't want to call it justice, but there'd be like a nice story arc to it. Because Jahan Dotson actually was a positive factor for the Eagles in the Super Bowl.
He almost had the first touchdown of the game.
He did. By the way, can't remember if Meg and I were having this discussion. Meg McDonald was on the show earlier in the week. I don't remember if we were having this discussion on air or off air. Can you imagine how much the books were sweating? Because Jahan Dotson was like 20,000 to 1 to be the first touchdown scorer. So if folks paid like $5, they were going to get thousands of dollars in return.
Yeah, if Jalen Hurts leads him and he doesn't have to, slow down, because he cooked Jalen Watson. I was like, dying.
He sure did. It's like, oh, yeah, that's why that guy, if only he had done that more here. Not like he had a great year. Certainly, I think the Commanders are coming out all right on this deal. It's not like, oh, well, the Eagles, thank God they got Jahan Dotson. There could have been a lot of receivers. The point is, there is, if Jahan Dotson, like, finally makes a play for the Eagles in the Super Bowl. And then the week that follows is the end of Shane and Oxon Hill's run. I feel like that's appropriate.
No, that's fair.
So perhaps for the last time, definitely not for the last time, perhaps for the last time, ladies and gentlemen, the short, real TikTok version of one of the best calls we've ever gotten on the show. And by best, I mean absolute worst.
The guy had 11 touchdowns over the past 2 years. Terry McLaurin has 9. Olamide Zacchaeus had 10 catches last year. Diami Brown had 100 yards last year. Are we a better team without Jahan Dotson? No, we're not. So stop all the baloney, man. We traded Montez Sweat, and now we have Cleveland Furrow, who had 2 sacks. And Dante Fowler, who had 2 sacks. We have Austin Eckler, who is 30 years old. Like, come on, bro. Kendall Fuller is in Miami. Curtis Samuel is in Buffalo. Cam Curl is in with the Rams. And we have a guy, Adam Peters, who's bringing in bums. And everybody's like, oh, just because we're bringing in new faces mean we're better.
It's so good.
I'm not going to lie. Adding some animation to it just because I know the call so well.
Yeah. Anthony, if you're just listening, Anthony was mouthing. It was like a sing-along for Anthony is basically what it was. It wasn't full-on karaoke. He was doing it silent karaoke. It was what do they call it? Mouthing. But it was like you were miming the call.
Sort of, kind of.
Yeah.
Good old Shane, man.
Good old Shane. You know, some of our most favorite calls that we've had, some of our most infamous and famous callers are regulars on the show. They call back. We've never heard from Shane again.
We haven't.
What if he just pops up in the middle of the summer next year?
That would be crazy.
I want to.
We'll see what the first free agent move Adam Peters makes.
Well,
I
want to know if Shane knows that he's semi-famous.
I think he knows.
Like, I wonder if if he's had friends send him that TikTok. Like, bro, this you?
They're talking about you. I don't know. Do you think callers get, excited to be talked about, or they be like turned off a little bit? Like,
I think it depends.
What are you talking about, Sydney?
I think it depends. I think some people love the attention. I think some people bite off more than they can chew.
Yeah.
We're going to actually talk about the mock drafts we planned on talking about next. Coming up at 6 o'clock. Yes, Anthony, what's that big smile on your face? Are you really that excited for Logan Paulson and Take Command coming up at 6 o'clock?
Yes, I am.
Or were you just acting like an absolute fool and I wasn't watching?
Yeah, sort of, kind of. So you can't hear me in the when you're not here, or if I have you potted up. But I was doing my Omega Psi barks to the song,
To the Nelly song?
playing. Yeah. I got very excited.
Yeah.
It just made me want to, ooh. See, look,
Punch the microphone.
Yeah, I didn't hit the microphone and everything.
I hope people aren't listening to us too loud. I do kind of wonder something. Like, people, like, you don't need to blast a podcast or a radio show or any kind of audio that's not like music. Like, it's one thing if you're bumping music, but like, is there anybody that's just like, yo, I'm rolling, blaring the Hoffman Show, rolling down 17th Street?
To the max.
Yeah, let the people know. We're here to talk about NFL mock drafts.
Yes, sir.
Bump that to your neighbors. All right. Anthony, the NFL Network and their slew of analysts are now up to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different mock drafts. So that means up to 7 different players that the Commanders could take at the 29th pick. Let's roll through all who they've got. The first one is by Dan Parr, who is one of their content and draft strategy guys at NFL Network. Man, this is a lot harder to get to the Commanders pick than it was last year.
Oh, you got to scroll, huh?
A lot of scrolling. Then I go back up to the top, click to the next one, scroll back to the bottom. A lot of scrolling here on this laptop. And I think most of them are going offensive line. In this particular case, Josh Connerly Jr., the offensive tackle out of Oregon, is the pick. I think he's an interesting one. In this particular mock draft, James Pierce, who's an edge out of Tennessee, I think he's a name to watch. He's still on the board.
He's a dog.
Yeah. Jahad Campbell, the edge / linebacker from Alabama, goes off the board one before. And I think one of the names to watch is, well, tell you what, let's keep going through these and see if the name that I'm thinking about pops up in any of these. Next up, Chad Roeder, who's one of their draft analysts. He has the Commanders taking JT Tuamalo, who is an edge from Ohio State. So other names are off the board around there. Azare Thomas, the corner from Florida State, goes to the Vikings after. He's got Jackson Dart in a projected trade going 31 to the Jets, and then Connerly going 32 to the Ravens. So you're starting to see in this range, John Campbell's name a lot. Some of the receivers, Luther Burden from Mizzou, Egbuka from Ohio State, some of the offensive linemen. So I think you're going to sense a theme here amongst all these mock drafts, Anthony. That theme is line of scrimmage.
Mm-hmm.
Cynthia Freeland, who's their analytics guru at the NFL Network. She has, interestingly enough, Luther Burden, the wide receiver out of Mizzou, which is interesting. Like her write-up, because remember, hers is model-based, it's analytics-based. Like she's not watching tape doing this stuff. She's saying, hey, whatever the model is, teams are looking for X. This is the best player available based off the data that we have on college. This is a purely analytical model. And she goes, and team needs is apparently a part of it, because her write-up says, I'm pretty shocked my model didn't have the Commanders taking an offensive lineman here, but maybe that reinforces the lack of first-round value among that group this year. Burden's stutter step, starting and stopping, and slot production potential should fit well with Jaden Daniels and Cliff Kingsbury's offense. I think it's a really interesting pick. I haven't watched Burden a ton yet, but I know he's a little bit smaller guy, higher quickness. Like, they don't really have that body type. That's something we talked about at times last year. Like, Jamison Crowder would inconsistently fill that void, but Jamison doesn't really have a lot of long speed, and he's obviously he's like not even 5'11". He's like 5'9", 5'8". So not a ton of size. I think Luke McCaffrey is a guy that they hope develops into a different kind of slot receiver, but also maybe plays outside. So the idea of like a quick over-the-middle target to complement whatever they get out of the tight end position, or maybe even that guy is a better long-term fit with a guy like Ben Sinnott, who can, from the tight end position, stretch the field vertically, as opposed to a guy like Ertz, who has that shake over the middle. I think that's an interesting pick. Definitely not where I'm looking for them to attack in round one, but if he's the best player available, he's the best player available.
But does he fit their prototypical receiver? They're looking for big, strong, physical, can block. I feel like Luther Burden, when I've looked at him or seen him anyway, he sort of kind of reminds me of a Jahan Dotson to an extent.
That is a great question. I have not watched him enough to have an answer on that. I would need to know how physical he is in the run game. I would need to know what kind of attitude, what kind of competitor he is. If he's going to, there's no way they're not drafting someone in the first round who doesn't have the commander tag.
So now, he is nice, though. I will say that. Yeah. He is nice.
But, like, think of guys that are uber competitive and maybe a little undersized that they drafted last year. There's one that stands out. Mike Sanders still. If you got that dog in you and you're willing to do the work, they can get over some of the positional size stuff. Yeah. All right. Guy that we will probably talk to in a couple weeks at the NFL Combine. We had him on last year. Lance Zierlein. He has... by the way, we should say that's one of the number one picks. Cam Ward, it's really Cam Ward, Abdul Carter, Travis Hunter in some order for most people at the top of their drafts. And then it's how far down does Shador get? This is the guy that I was hoping would pop up somewhere. Josh Simmons, offensive tackle out of Ohio State. I'm going to spoiler alert here for the next segment. Outside of Will Campbell, the LSU offensive tackle, and I apologize, including Will Campbell, Logan thinks Simmons might be the best offensive lineman in the class.
Oh, wow.
And he might wind up being there at 29 because he had a non-contact, really scary knee injury that caused him to miss basically the entire season. But if you can get that high upside guy and he becomes your starting left tackle for the next decade, and you either kick Coleman inside or kick Coleman to the right side and kick Wiley out, however you want to reshuffle the deck there, that's a good plan. High upside, trust your medical staff to get things right. But Josh Simmons is the name that I need to now go watch him. Although I feel very silly watching O-line play. I'm like, yeah, whatever you say, Logan. You were basically an offensive lineman in your career, the blocking tight end. But from a like big time athletic profile, like he's the guy. All these other guys, they're potentially good tackles, guard potential, like potentially really good guards. But Simmons is the guy that, according to Logan, he thinks he's got the highest upside of this entire group.
Yeah, I'm looking at he's 6'5", 310.
Yeah, okay, but I think he can add some size to his frame.
Yeah, I was more so just thinking when you said about possibly moving Brandon Coleman to the inside, it's given sort of kind of like Eagles because their O-line is big. They're stout. Landon Dickinson, big dude. Mekhi Becton, big dude. Then you got Jordan and you got Lane. And it's like, it's hard to move those guys. So
100%.
The possibilities are numerous, especially if you can, shuffle some of those guys around, bump some guys inside, outside. Kind of thing.
And one of the things that you'll hear in this Take Command clip we're going to play here in a second, too, is you hear, oh, that guy could be a guard. That guy could be it feels like every tackle prospect's like, I don't know. I kind of like him better at guard. And so I was like, hold on, timeout. Logan, explain to me why some guys are better at tackle, if every guy is a potential guard, well, who's the guys that are going to play tackle? Somebody's got to play tackle. So can you explain to me what he's looking for? And he was a really great description. You'll hear that next. Real quickly, some of the other guys. James Pierce is the pick in Eric Edholm's. And then I think we talked about Bucky Brooks and Daniel Jeremiah's mocks before. But Donovan Jackson, who is the other offensive lineman that's going to go in the first round from Ohio State, could be a guard, could be a tackle. That's Bucky Brooks' pick. And then... and he's got Shador going number 1, by the way. I think that'll change. I think Cam Ward's going to wind up being the first quarterback off the board. And then Josh Simmons again in Daniel Jeremiah's first mock. So I think some of the mocks that happen a little bit later in the month, you're starting to see Simmons go higher. So I'm not saying get your hopes way up. But then again, if he's that good, if he's that much better and Peters believes in him, he starts dropping into the low 20s. Getting from 29 to 23 is not that hard. Getting from 29 to 13, that's a different story. 29 to 8, that's a different story. But 29 to 23, you can make that happen. Add in like a 4th or a 5th. So I think that's worth keeping in mind too. And if there's a prospect that they really like, will they ultimately go up and get them? And then maybe they trade back later and wind up with the same number of rookies coming in. But let's get a big picture view of some of the names and just how deep the offensive and defensive line classes are. Logan Paulson's take on that via Take Command, then our weekend preview to wrap up the show here on the Team 980. the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. We're streaming live on YouTube too at the Team 980. And we did a full hour of discussing the contour of the NFL draft, this class. What I mean by that is, like, what positions are deep, what positions are shallow, what positions are top heavy, what positions might you be able to nab someone really good in the third round. And we did that on the Take Command podcast, myself and Logan Paulson. And Logan's only watched about 200 prospects at this point, so what does he know? But we wanted to share with you here on the radio show the offensive and defensive line portions of that. I want to do that for two reasons. One, I think that's the positions that most of you are the most interested in because it's where the Commanders probably go early in this draft based off of the contour of it and their needs. But also, there's a point in here where I talked to Logan about what makes a really good tackle versus a really good guard. And as you hear different evaluations of all these different prospects over the next couple of months, and you hear conversations about, for instance, why Brandon Coleman might ultimately get kicked inside in the same way that Sam Cosmi did after playing tackle as a rookie to guard, I think it's a really good piece of information to have. So without further ado, me and Logan breaking down the lines of scrimmage in the 2025 NFL Draft. Take Command Podcast, NFL Draft, Big Picture Preview Edition. Craig Hoffman here, Logan Paulson there, and it is time to talk about the lines of scrimmage. This is the part of the pod that I think most Commanders fans are most interested in, Logan, because these are the two areas that Washington feels extraordinarily likely to attack, both from how this draft, we talk about the contour of the draft, the shape of this draft class, and their needs. And I think luckily they match up pretty well because there are a lot of offensive linemen that are towards the top of this class. There's also a lot, like this might be the deepest defensive tackle class we've had in a long time, but there's also like good edge depth. So when we talk about the offensive linemen, you got a couple of guards at the, or maybe one guard, Tyler Booker, up there, but the offensive tackle group is very, very deep.
Yeah, but also I think it's an interesting group because I think there are a lot of guys, including Will Campbell, that I think some teams are kind of on the fence about whether they're actually tackles or guards, and I think that's good. And I think one of the value adds of drafting an offensive lineman, especially a tackle, is like, hey, if it doesn't work out a tackle, they can play guard. And so I think, like, when you look at Will Campbell, you look at Banks from Texas, when you look at Membu from Missouri, I think all three of those guys they're listed as tackles, and I think they could play tackle, but I also think that they could be better guard. Like we were talking about Membo before the show started from Missouri, like he's 6'3.5", 335. He's got 33.5-inch arms. So like all the measurements there that he could play tackle, but just from like a movement stance standpoint, like I think he could be a dominant guard. So again, I think teams will kind of say, hey, fail at tackle, then move to guard. But in terms of the Commanders, he's not going to be available when the Commanders are picking. But like that type of guy is exactly what the Commanders are looking for, right? Someone who could play guard in a pinch, play tackle in a pinch. And I think that's where this offensive line class is so interesting, is that like there aren't a lot of, in my estimation, true tackles, and it makes it kind of tough. But Can I pause right there and have you talk about that a little bit more? Because I think, we have this discussion every year. And what to you makes a true tackle, and then what makes someone a candidate to potentially go into guard? Like, what is the difference in those, whether it's body types, movement skills? Because ultimately, like, we can say that, if he fails a tackle, he goes into guard. Okay, well, I still need someone to play tackle. Yeah. So, like, if you're Washington and you're drafting either you've decided that's the move for Brandon Coleman to kick him inside and you're drafting a left tackle, or you're trying to replace Andrew Wiley at right tackle, like, I need someone to play tackle. So what are you looking for in an actual, like, this guy's a tackle versus we're going to try him at tackle, but I like him better at guard?
So to me, it's really comes down to like movement skills, and I think when you look at, your Jordan Mailatas, you look at your Tristan Wirfs, look at your Trent Williams, Lane Johnsons, they have the requisite arm length. So they've usually got 33 plus inch arm length, right? So 34, 35 inches is kind of like what you're looking for. 33.5 is pretty good. And then their ability to play in space. And so that is the lateral quickness to move in space, because you're just dealing with more square footage when you play tackle, right? So you have to be able to kick vertically, kind of to attack like what the speed rusher is trying to attack when he's trying to attack your outside shoulder as a pass protector, and then be able to redirect inside. So athletically, you're looking for someone like that. So obviously length is helpful in that situation, body mass is another one that's kind of big here, right? Because there's a couple guys that are really dynamic, like Marcus Mbo from Purdue is crazy athletic, but he's like 299, he's like 6'4", so like when someone gets their hands on him, you're like, oh, that's too much. There's like, he's giving up too much bull, right? And so like, even though he's athletically capable of playing tackle, a lot of people are projecting him to play guard or center because they take some of that air out in terms of the bull rush. So you're really looking.
So if you're bull rushing as an edge, you have a extra couple of yards of head start as opposed to the contact being instant, so that inertia is not quite as severe on the bull rush, even though defensive tackles are obviously, you think of them as like more powerful body types, but they don't get the running start that an edge player does.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So you're looking for someone that can kind of dance like a bear, can sit heavy power, and also get out on a screen and like smoke a corner, right? And so like when you look at the top guys, that's what they all do. And for me, it's like the athletic threshold to do that is it eliminates a lot of people. Like it takes a lot of people off the map. So like taking Will Campbell, for example, who in my opinion is the best offensive lineman in the class, like his balance is tremendous, but I have concerns about his arm length, right? And how he punches. And again, like his movement skills are there, but if his arm's measuring at 33 or 32 and a half, it's like, he's going to have a hard time blocking Myles Garrett. I mean, everybody does, but that lack of length is something that really shows up at tackle more than any other position. So to me, we mentioned Banks, we mentioned Campbell, we mentioned Membu from Missouri.
Yeah.
Like the other guy is Josh Simmons, and there is no more pure tackle in the draft than Josh Simmons. And to me, he would be my number one offensive lineman, but he's coming off a pretty significant knee injury, and they've been really kind of cloak and dagger about what the injury is. But he moves like he wears number 71, but like there's a movement aptitude, kind of like Trent or Darisaw up in Minnesota, those guys that can kind of get out in space and explode through the hips and mirror and play basketball on the edge. So he's a guy that I'm really excited about. And then obviously there's what's his name from Oregon is Josh Connerly from Oregon is a guy that I think has those similar athletic traits, plays incredibly consistently, and feels like a true tackle. So that's kind of what I'd say. They kind of have those athletic movement skills, and the measurables are all there in a special way. But obviously, one's lower on the board because of injury. Connerly's lower because he lacks ideal body mass. But hopefully, that's something you can get cleaned up at the next level. A little bit developmental, but a guy that you feel pretty confident about. Those guys, I think, will all go in the first round probably.
How do you like the depth here, and just like generally the idea of taking a premier position later in the draft? I mean, who knows? Maybe it worked out. Maybe they got a steal in Brandon Coleman, a guy who might not ever be a top 5 tackle in the league, but certainly could be a potential starter. I mean, he was a starter last year, but like a potential good starter. Or do you like attacking maybe guard later on in the draft and saying like, hey, if we can get a guy in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th round, but because he's a guard, he's actually good enough to start from day one. Is that a viable strategy? Because I feel like that's something we've seen teams do.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are really good guards, like Gray Zabel from North Dakota is a guy that really jumps out to me. You mentioned Booker as a top, 25 player for Zane? I'm not sure.
Dane's got him at 18.
Yeah. So the other guy would be Gray Zabel for me. And if you were to pick him at, what would that be, 29 for the Commanders, that would be an interesting selection. A guy that can play center, guard, played left tackle at NDSU. Really had a tremendous Senior Bowl. But yeah, in terms of taking a guard later, I always think you just want to take shots, right? Like, for example, there's a guy from Iowa State, Jalen Travis. He's 6'7". He's like 345. He's got 35.5-inch arms, 34.5-inch arms, excuse me. But like, he's a guy that I don't think a lot of people are talking about, but you know, like if you picked him in the 3rd round, like you'd feel really great about his opportunity to potentially develop into a starting left tackle and bump Brandon Coleman inside, potentially, right? And again, that's great value later. And I think when you look at teams that, like Philadelphia is a good example of this, that do a good job building through the trenches, they find guys with traits. So Jalen Travis is an interesting example of traits. I just listed them all out. Everything checks off, movement skills check off. Maybe not ready right this second, but let him sit for 6 games, then he becomes your starter, and you just kind of shore up that depth. Or Anthony Belton from NC State's another guy that could play guard or tackle, is one of these like crazy, big, twitchy guys that you worry about like consistency, but the highs are extremely high. So if you say like, man, if we can get this guy to be the player we see on these 15 plays a game, like he could be a difference maker on the offensive line, but that's a later round selection because of the inconsistency with him, right? And then you get guys like Wyatt Millham from West Virginia, who played tackle in college, probably playing guard. Reminds me a lot of Sam Cosmi, actually, like in terms of movement skills, but a little bit developmental. But why not take a shot on unathletic talent that can kind of be cultivated and develop into one of these positions that you're talking about? So to me, it's like guard, tackle, whatever you want. Offensive line is something that needs to be fortified kind of constantly, right? And the more depth you can cultivate there, the better. So there are pieces here, late second round, third round, fourth round, where you say, hey man, like, let's take a shot on one of these players. And if they're the right type of guy and someone we think is going to get better, this could be a hit for us.
For sure. And this is where coaching becomes critical. The reason Philly is able to do this at the level they are, in turn, like, yes, they attack it. Howie Roseman's always taking offensive linemen, but then Jeff Stoutland coaches them up, and they get the most out of everybody. So can Washington and Bobby Johnson do that? We actually have a really good mailbag question that we're going to attack early next week about kind of the type of player that Cliff and Bobby and Dan and Adam are looking for along the offensive line. So we'll get to that more next week. Defensive line, Logan. There's good depth at edge and obviously really good high-level talent at the top with Carter. Jalen Walker's an interesting guy. Shamar Stewart out of Texas A&M. Those are 3 top 10 players for Dane Brugler on his list. But then the defensive tackle depth in this class is insane. Daniel Jeremiah put out a post the other day that said last year he had 12 starting grades or potential starter grades on defensive tackles, 12. This year he has 24. So we are talking about an extremely deep defensive line class. What stands out about it to you?
Yeah, just the depth and kind of like pick your body type. You know what I mean? Like I don't want to put you on the spot and I can talk while you're looking it up, but who else is on the list there in terms of first round grades for Dane?
Are you looking for edges or for
edges? Yeah. I'm just curious.
For edge, he's got Carter, Walker, Stewart, Mike Green, 6'3", 251 out of Marshall. Michael Williams, the edge out of Georgia, 6'5", 265. James Pierce out of Tennessee. And then I guess the last one would be Donovan Eziraku.
From Boston College.
Boston College. He's a 30th ranked player. And one other name I'll mention just because I saw him as a draft or mocked to Washington. I think it was on one of CBS's mocks. JT Tuamalo. Out of Ohio State. Dane's got him at 41. He's got Jack Sawyer, his teammate, at 44. So those are kind of the guys I would say are in that range. I don't know exactly how Dane's got him graded out, but those, in terms of top 100 rankings, those are all top 50 guys.
Yeah, and I think that's a good reflection, right? Like, it's always so frustrating when you start this process and you get like your preliminary list. Like Shamar Stewart was like the 5th guy, and I'm like, oh man, he'd be perfect for Washington 29. Then you go watch his film and you're like, this is the freakiest dude I've ever seen. And you're like, oh my God, if he's there at 29, like, but then obviously like the process happens, people start watching more film, and then he's a top 10 player, which is incredible.
Dane Brugler's got him at 9.
Yeah, right. So anyway, so like there are just again, it's interesting when I did the edges, I expected it to be more deep. But I think the top end's better than people think from an athlete perspective. There are guys that are developmental, like Mike Green from Marshall is one of the most fun films you'll ever watch. But then he goes to the Senior Bowl and he has the big play against Connerly where he knocks him on his ass and everybody sees that, but didn't really win a lot of one-on-ones outside of that. So like, can he do it versus top flight competition? But awesome film. Michael Williams is kind of all over the place. He plays 4-eye, he plays end. I feel like he's a true edge player, but was kind of miscast at Georgia. And then you mentioned, I think, Tuamalo from Ohio State. I would love him. He's got the frame. He's got the kind of football instincts. Not the twitchiest guy, but is definitely an NFL player. Landon Jackson from Arkansas. I love his film, man. He just is a hard-nosed, blue-collar, like on my draft evals, I make a little note, like Commanders type player. Like, he doesn't have the pass rush.
6'7", 282. Oh my God.
He plays like an absolute maniac, like physical every down. He's running stuff like, and so like he's probably the 7th or 8th guy on Dane's list. I'm sure like he's probably like
he's
middle
10th on. I got Scouts Inc.'s list up as well. He's 10th on Scouts Inc.'s list, and he is 1, 2, 3. This is great podcasting. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10th on Dane's list as well.
So like the 10th player on the list is one that I think is an absolute
excuse my language, maniac. Well, you're gonna have to bleep that out. Like, he is just a fun player to watch. You know what I'm saying? So like, I don't know, like that to me, that kind of speaks to the depth of the class. I don't know if the peak's as good as it's been. I mean, Abdul Carter's an absolute maniac, but outside of that, it's a little bit like there's some question marks, but the runway is long with these guys, right? They've got big athletic dudes that play hard. It's exactly what you're looking for. So that's kind of how I feel about the class. I do feel like the defensive tackle class is deeper and longer, if that makes sense. Like, there are more pieces there. Like, it was funny when I was going through the edges, everyone kept talking about how deep it was. And I got to like 14 and I was like, I don't know about this guy. 15, I don't know about this guy. But there are some gems. Like, so for example, the kid from Oladejo from UCLA, he played like stand-up linebacker and converted to defensive end the last 4 games of the season. Plays like an absolute psychopath. You know what I mean? And he's probably 15th or 16th on the list if it even goes that far, right? But like, there are guys that fit play style, fit developmental upside that are really, really good.
That feels like a Commander's 5th round pick where they're all high-fiving in the room, be like, that guy's a Commander.
Dude, like, I was watching him and I'm like, this feels like Frankie Louvu. Honestly, like the way he attacks, like there was a play versus USC where he like kamikazes the mesh and like takes the quarterback out and the running back out together, but he's not like worried about protecting his body. He rushes as a spinner look over the center guard area. Like, there's just, if you're willing to kind of hunt through, like Brandon Sorrell from Texas is not like a height, weight, speed measurement guy, but a guy that just gets how to pass rush, you know what I mean? And gets how to win and has a bunch of sacks and good production in college. So like, it might not be the top end, like Landon Jackson to me is like the cutoff in terms of like top end guys. But then there's guys that if you develop, if you find a role, you feel pretty good about. And so we talk about offensive line depth. I feel the same way about defensive line. And so there are some of these guys later where you're like, shoot, if you pick this guy in the 4th round, 5th round, like that's a steal, and a guy that's going to be able to carve out a role on your team. And maybe that means it is a deep class. You know what I mean? If you're getting a 5th round pick that's playing for you. So, but it feels like there's a little bit of a drop off after that 10-11 spot.
Right. There's just less options. You gotta know where to look versus defensive tackle where it's like, you know, just guys are going to fall to you because there's so many of them.
Yeah, that was crazy. I haven't really done my full defensive tackle evaluation, but just kind of the preliminary look. Like, I was like, man, kind of feels like running back where it's like your style, your guy. We can get into the 20s of guys that I think could play for an NFL roster. Now, playing for an NFL roster as a rotational 3 technique is one thing, and then being an absolute stud is another. But I think like when you're the Commanders, like finding guys that have developmental upside that fit your vision, like when there is this kind of class where there's like, you get a big run stopping nose, you can get a juiced up, twitched up pass rusher in the 3rd round, like that's a big deal, you know? And I think like that depth is extremely important. So I'm if you need a defensive tackle or defensive end, you're going to be fine because there's a lot of guys in this class. It's just about identifying which one is the one that fits your vision for the team and which one do you feel like you want to work with and you want to develop.
Right. And I mean, they did take Jerzon Newton in the 2nd round last year. So if you're Washington and you're just looking for like a big body to complement Jerzon in the 4th round, like that's awesome. Like, love that. They don't need a guy to be available in the 1st round or the 2nd round to them at that position. But if you get a guy in the 4th or 5th that can be a part of your rotation and that big body run stopper, let's just have him play on 1st and 2nd down. Like, we know that they're gonna package this thing up and have Frankie and Dorrance and Jerzon and, you know, pick your other edge, that they bring back on 3rd down anyway. Like they're looking to fill roles, especially late, and that's a really smart way to build a football team. I think that's going to be something that plays well for them in terms of the defensive tackles in this class. All right, that is from Take Command. If you want the full podcast, which has a full preview of the running back class, the wide receiver class, the quarterback class, everything, just kind of a super high-level look of how this draft is going to shake out and how that ultimately affects the Commanders, the options available to them, how the thin quarterback class could affect Washington as well. Check out Take Command this weekend. It's a really good episode. And next week, we're actually going to do our first mock draft. We're going to take a look at just use a mock draft simulator to get to the Commanders, look at some of the trades we might have made along the way, and then what options are available to Washington at 29. So mock draft 1.0 on Take Command coming next week. Also, we got a mailbag on Take Command that's coming too. If you want to submit a question for me and Logan, you can hit me on Instagram at hoffman.sports. You can also drop me an email. I think hoffmanshow@gmail.com works directly, or just use the contact page at hoffmanshow.com. I should test that other email, Anthony. I should test to see if hoffmanshow@gmail.com works still.
Yeah, you should.
Okay, I will do that. But I definitely know if you use Hoffman Show at or hoffmanshow.com in the contact link, then you can submit your question there in the old question box. All right, that's from Take Command earlier this week / yesterday / in your feeds this morning. Coming up next, we're going to look ahead. It's time for the weekend preview, brought to you by. You'll find out who it's brought to you by next. Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Streaming live on YouTube, too, at the Team 980. Man, I need to get out of these studio lights, man. I feel like I've been sitting in front of this microphone a lot this week. A lot of shows, a lot of stuff, a lot of things happening. I still got more editing I got to do. I got more stuff that's just sitting there in the can, as they say, Anthony.
So you just been talking all weekend, huh? I mean, all
talking, and then doing a lot of talking. A lot of talkie into this here microphone. Some of the talkie that is still, quote unquote, in the can. On the Hoffman W Sports side of the shop, I got a chance this afternoon to catch up with Tara Micchione, the Washington Spirit defender, who was the lone Spirit player to make the U.S. Women's National Team roster for the upcoming She Believes Cup. That interview will be out this weekend at Hoffman W Sports on YouTube and in the Hoffman W Sports podcast feed, so you can check that out. Tara's lovely. It's so funny. Tara and I have such a funny relationship. Not that we're great friends or anything, just I interviewed her on her draft night. And so I've gotten to watch her grow up. One of the last thing I did at the Spirit before I left was the 2020, would have been 2021 NWSL draft. And so on their draft nights, Tara and Trinity Rodman were two of the players that I interviewed. And so getting to watch them grow, almost they feel like, I don't know, like little sisters or like kids that I've watched grow up. I don't know what the feeling is, but there's it's just a very cool thing to see. I remember when they were children fresh out of the draft. I mean, Trin especially. Trin was literally 18 years old. But then to watch them grow. I mean, Tara's engaged now. We were joking because, we're both, how did we get, she's a veteran now on the team. Mm-hmm. And, getting old sucks. And it's happening to all of us all the time. But that was a very fun conversation. And she's now breaking in. This will be her first time ever on the national team for a camp where there's games. She was in the January camp a couple weeks ago. But that was just a practice session type deal. So we talked about this moment where she's going to get to walk into the locker room and see her name on a U.S. national jersey for the first time and how cool that's going to be. So those games start next week. And then one of them is Sunday in Phoenix, and I'll be there. So I'm looking forward to a little trip out west into warmer weather next week, Anthony.
No, that's pretty dope.
But that's the next weekend preview. Now it's time for this weekend's preview. It's the weekend preview brought to you by
nobody, Craig.
Yep, still nobody. It's still out there. If you could sponsor the weekend preview, just get in touch with us, and we'll connect you to the right people. HoffmanShow.com. HoffmanShow.com. If you would like to sponsor the weekend preview. Okay, there's also, by the way, if you want to sponsor Not My Beat or anything else on the show, we're open for business, baby. Let us know. But it's going to be a fun one this weekend, Anthony. There's a bunch of good hoops all over the map. Starting tonight, obviously college, but you got the All-Star weekend, and we can talk about how much we're actually interested in that in a second. But tonight, Unrivaled, one-on-one tournament, finale. You got 4 names left. And, of course, locally, we are most interested in, can Aaliyah Edwards finish this thing off? The Washington Mystics first-round pick last year started off the tournament by bludgeoning her fellow UConn Husky, the number 1 seed, the co-founder of Unrivaled, co-founder of the league, Breanna Stewart. She beats Breanna 12-0, and she has continued.
Donut.
Yeah, donuts. And by the way, the total prize money, $350,000, $250K to the winner. And tonight, there are just 4 remaining. It's Nafisa Collier, the other co-founder of the league. Mm-hmm. Arike Ogunbowale, who was my pick because Arike is as nasty of a one-on-one player as there is. Azurá Stevens, and then Aaliyah. That's it.
That's a good bump, man. That's a good bump right there, baby.
Aaliyah takes on Arike, and then Azurá takes on Fee. Winners face off. Champion gets decided tonight.
Uh-oh. What you got? Oh, well, you said Arike.
That was my pick pre-tournament. I'm all on the Aaliyah Edwards bandwagon.
Yeah, me too.
Look,
man.
I talked to Aaliyah in, do you remember when that was? Early January? Maybe it was late December. I talked to her sometime before she went to Miami. And at the end of that interview, she's like, are you going to root for me? And I was like, of course I'm going to root for you. And she's like, okay, the Mist, that's your new favorite team. And we didn't even talk about the one-on-one tournament. But if you're a friend of the show, We're a loyal crew.
Mm-hmm.
Don't mess around over here. My new pick is Aaliyah Edwards.
Let's go then.
Let's go. And by the way, this is Aaliyah Edwards 2.0. Not just because she's not a rookie anymore. The mask is off, Anthony.
Yep.
She's out there playing with her full face exposed.
Yep.
As opposed to being in the mask all last year. And if this is the new Aaliyah, I mean, I joked with Sydney Johnson, the Mystics coach, when we talked earlier this week. I was like, all these plans you probably got offensively, scrap those, coach. Don't make this harder than it has to be. Just give the ball to Aaliyah one-on-one. She's barely one of the best one-on-one players on the planet. And he's like, I wish it was that easy. And I was like, apparently it is, coach. Don't overthink this.
Yeah. Let her operate at that free throw line area. Let her, hit shoot some threes.
By the way, Shakira had an upset earlier too. So let's just, if Aaliyah gets tired, just give the ball to Shakira.
Yep.
One-on-one ISO ball, what everybody dreams of. No, they're going to be playing team ball. They'll be playing 5-on-5, doing all the ball movement and stuff. But I'm excited for this, man. And the physicality. These girls are trying to.
It starts at 7 today?
Let's see. Aaliyah versus Enrique at 7:30.
Okay.
Azure at Fee against Fee at 7:45. And then it says 8:05. It says then there's like 3 games listed, and it says finals: 8:05, 8:25, 8:45. So I wonder if they play like a best of 3.
No way. That's a lot of basketball.
It is
a lot of games at 1-on-1.
It is. So I wonder what the deal is on that. But that would be dope.
A best of 2 out of 3.
Yeah, best 2 out of 3.
Yeah.
Let's see, is there like a rules schedule?
But I ain't gonna lie, like if you playing if you're tiring yourself out defensively, offensively, to do that 3, well, I guess it's a best of 3, but if it does end up being 1-1,
to play 4 games of 1-on-1 in about an hour-ish at that level.
Yeah, that's a lot.
At a 250 Ks on the line level.
Hey, look, the bag is on the line.
The bag is on the line. On the line tonight, Rising Stars game. They got multiple teams. The winner of the Rising Stars tournament, if you will. They're playing 5-on-5. But the winner gets to get into the All-Star Sunday. So now there's 3 All-Star teams that have been picked. And then 4th will join, and they'll have a little tournament on Sunday. So we'll get to find out if this new All-Star format's any good. And do you have any interest in any part of All-Star Weekend, Anthony? Like, All-Star Weekend for me in the NBA has become a thing where if there's nothing else on, I'll put it on. But I'm not seeking it out.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not. The 3-point contest, the dunk contest, there's nothing that screams, Anthony, you need to be watching this. Now, I will see who's in the celebrity game. I do like, paying attention to that. Like,
well, Alicia Gray is in there from the W, and she didn't make the finals on Unrivaled. She unfortunately did not get her money.
Yeah, I know.
But that soundbite will live forever.
It will.
It will.
Who don't like money?
Who don't like to get that money? We got to get that on the board. Great college action this weekend as well. Not a whole lot going on tonight, but tomorrow, I mean, one of the matchups of the season. What gets better than 1 versus 2? Tomorrow night, let's see, who's hosting this game? It is or is it Sunday, Anthony? Oh, there it is. Nope, 4 o'clock tomorrow in Tuscaloosa. Auburn, Alabama. Like classic rivalry, SEC rivals, in-state rivals, the whole deal. But it's got to be one of the first times ever that they're facing off. If not the first time ever, they're facing off as 1 versus 2. Alabama favored by 1.5 at home. That should be fun on a Saturday afternoon at 4 o'clock.
That's going to be crazy, man. Crazy, crazy, crazy. And then also, did you see the games on the women's side on Sunday?
What we got on Sunday. And first of all, just real quick, rounding out some of the other good matchups. Wisconsin-Purdue, 1 o'clock on Saturday, a classic Big Ten as opposed to some of the other whatever wackadoodle Big Ten stuff that you got going on. Creighton-St. John's on 3 o'clock FS1 on Sunday, and then Iowa-Maryland on Sunday. Terps hanging on to that 25th and final spot in the ESPN coaches poll. Don't forget Monday, it's a long weekend too. Duke, Virginia, Arizona, Baylor, top 25 action on Monday. By the way, we're off on Monday, so we'll see you all again on Tuesday. What we got on the women's side of it this weekend, though, Ant?
Craig, we have a star-studded matchup between the number 4 ranked South Carolina Gamecocks and the number 7 Connecticut Huskies. Oh, my gosh. AZ coming off a 34-point performance, 8 threes. South Carolina, doing what they do best. I'm excited.
Yeah, I'm mad excited. I'm mad excited for that. By the way, coming off of, we were both so bummed that the USC UCLA game was on so late last night, and we missed, or I don't know. Did you miss it? You watched it? You were up? Man, Juju Watkins, barbecue chicken, 38 points, 11 rebounds. She had 8 blocks in that game.
8 blocks. Man, I couldn't believe it. Like, literally, possession after possession. Block, block, block. Then she gets the block, the rebound, the steal, the dime. I said, good gracious.
Jaden Daniels, by the way, sitting on the sideline for it. Juju and USC, I believe they were the 6th seed going into, or the 6th ranked team in the country going into that. Upset, number 1 seed and undefeated previously, no more. UCLA last night. Yeah, then you got the star-studded matchup this weekend. UConn and South Carolina. That's a 1 o'clock ABC game on Sunday. And LSU Texas, by the way, is at 3 o'clock following that. Yeah. So you got back-to-back top 7 matchups. Juju and company back in action against Washington. You got Michigan State, UCLA. That's 2 ranked teams. Obviously, UCLA, that'll be their last game as the number 1 team before the new rankings come out. That's all on Sunday. Anything good on Monday on the women's side of it? Kansas State, West Virginia is 2 ranked teams. Duke, Notre Dame. There you go. Very possible that Notre Dame is the number 1 team in the country when they take the floor on Monday night against 13th ranked Duke. Michigan, Maryland as well. Brenda Freese's crew currently ranked 17 as we steamroll towards the NCAA tournaments here in a couple of weeks. That is our weekend preview, brought to you by nobody, man. When we get back, we have real things, real people said it to real microphones. Also brought to you by nobody. This isn't Rebecca Black, Anthony.
It's not, though. It's not. But
what-
Craig,
what-
love is in the air.
It
Shout
is.
out to you and Mrs. Hoffman.
Thank you. This is the first dance song for my wedding. And we have celebrated Valentine's Day all week in the Hoffman house, in part by buying ourselves Beyonce tickets for when she's here in July.
There we go.
So,
Perfect.
which, by the way, dog, it was a war to get those tickets. Apparently, I didn't know that I got in, got out, and was safe, marked safe in the great Beyonce ticket hunt of 2025.
Yeah, I didn't have the patience for it. I'm not gonna lie. I got on my computer. They had me waiting, and I was like, all right, I got other things to do. So if I end up going, I'll get lucky down the road. I'll resell ticket or
people start selling tickets. Yeah,
it's sad.
they do control. That is the good thing, though, right? Is like they control the resale market now more.
Good, 'cause, man.
Well, like I think there probably will be ways to like buy them through a third party that costs $1 zillion, but like there's also like I don't know if that you can actually do that. Like I think like the artists have been able to reel some of that in. That instead of, I'm not going to say any of the sites, but like the resale sites, everything's got to go through SeatGeek, who is obviously also at times a resale site, but SeatGeek is the one who's running the actual sale for anything at Northwest Stadium right now. And so people just sell their tickets back at the original price. Someone else buys them at the original price. So maybe you'll get lucky, but yeah, man, we got 2. I'm very happy about it. We're trying to get 4 to be able to go with another couple, but I was like, I'm going to buy these 2, and if we get 4 later, we'll resell these back. And thank God that I got those 2.
Lucky you, man.
Yeah. All right, before we get to real things, one last Anthony Taylor Swift TikTok update.
Uh-oh.
Anthony.
So we were at 5:04 early at the midway
point
mark
of the show.
right?
This TikTok started the show at 489,000. Yesterday at 5 o'clock, it was at 200,000. Anthony, guess how many views you trying to guess Jalen Hurts quote or Taylor Swift lyric currently has on TikTok?
521.
Not quite that bad. 512,000 views.
Okay.
So probably by the end of the night, Shane and Oxon Hill, or certainly by the end of the weekend, Shane and Oxon Hill, it's crazy to be like, oh, I only need 40,000 more views, when most things I do on TikTok get 1,500 to 3,000 views. But only 40,000 more views in Swifty in the Swifty algorithm until Shane and Oxon Hill has been knocked off his throne as my most viewed TikTok of all time. Speaking of Jalen Hurts, it is time for Real Things Real People Said into real microphones.
Real things.
We're not going to be sucked this year.
Real people.
5-11, not very good.
Said into real microphones.
You know, the culture is actually damn good.
Even though it's the Eagles, there are few better days in Real Things land than parade days. We could play you some Landon Dickerson, but it would just be a bunch of bleeps. That dude went crazy today.
Oh my God.
But Jalen Hurts stepped to the podium and had lots of people to thank.
I want to thank my teammates, thank my offense, from the quarterback room to the receivers, the tight ends, the running backs, Saquon Barkley.
They all seen that on Twitter, had to.
I mean, I can't imagine what it's like to be on a team when something goes around viral like that that's on your team. Because there's one person that starts it, and then it's like, hey, have you seen this yet? Like, Saquon's going to be like, yeah, I've seen it. Just an old dude in Philly being like, Saquon Barkley?
Man, when we got Saquon Barkley,
when we got Saquon, it's over. So good. What else we got from the parade? We got Howie Roseman after he got hit in the head with a beer.
Two-time Super Bowl champion, Eagles fans, welcome Howie Roseman.
I bleed for this city. Go Eagles. Our players, our staff have done an unbelievable job. We are 2-time world champs, and we're coming back strong. Go Birds!
I should have left that part out.
I would say, as I was introducing that clip, I was thinking, if the Commanders win the Super Bowl, will Adam Peters speak at the parade? I don't feel like he's a parade speak guy. And I feel like Howie Roseman shouldn't have been.
I think he'll maybe give a couple words. I think they want everybody to at least like say hey to the city or, hi. Thank you guys for supporting.
I've seen Dan Quinn getting up there and be like, give it up for Adam Peters. Everywhere.
Okay.
And then Adam gets to step forward and be like, hey, thank you, thank you. Adam doesn't want to speak at a parade.
Yeah, he ain't going to.
If it was up to Adam, microphones wouldn't exist.
Yeah.
He's just that kind of guy.
Oh, man.
Something that he and Will Dawkins have in common.
They don't like the microphones?
No, they'll speak when they got to. They'll say as little as they can.
Mm-hmm.
They're very, very smart. But they don't want to deal with microphones.
Play the background, man.
They're in the background. That's our show. We're off on Monday. We'll see you Tuesday. Have a great holiday weekend, everybody.